Good morning, everyone. This is the budget hearing for Community Planning and Economic Development, which we'll do first. And since it's an action-packed, thick document, we want to be sensitive to time. Also followed immediately afterwards with the Regulatory Services Department. So to keep things moving on time, we're going to be able to begin because no quorum is required. And I am John Quincy, the chair of this committee, joined by Councilmember Yang and Councilmember Goodman, who chairs the Community Planning and the Community Development Regulatory Services Committee. And so it's great to have her presence here, and other council members will be joining as we begin. So I'm going to invite Mr. Taylor to start the presentation at your leisure.
Thank you, and good morning, Mr. Chair, distinguished members of the committee. Thank you for your time this morning. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Craig Taylor, and I am the Director for the Department of Community Planning and Economic Development. I'm also joined this morning by my executive team, Director Reimer, Director Poore, Director Frank, and Director Munson. I believe that Director Brennan must be on her way this morning. I know she intends on being here. Again, I'd like to thank you certainly for your time. We appreciate it, the opportunity to speak to you this morning about CPED's 2016 recommended budget. Let me also just add, I want you to know that CPED certainly stands poised to continue to do its part to help to move Minneapolis forward in the future. However, our ability to effectively and consistently meet our goals and objectives over time will in large part depend on the financial resources that we have at our disposal to continue to maintain CPED's current service levels and to certainly build on those as well. We believe that the Mayor's 2016 recommended budget will serve to support the work that we do, and it will also ensure CPED's capability to continue its commitment to excellence and quality in the work that we do for our city and certainly for the people in the city. So with that being said, let me begin. I'd like to start by giving you a brief overview of what the presentation will entail this morning. First, I'd like to begin by providing you with a recap of the budget summary totals. Secondly, providing you with a brief snapshot of each division's core programs. Third, provide a detailed overview of the enhancements for each division. And then fourth, by providing you with some general highlights of the performance outcomes for each of our divisions. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, the presentation will be provided. We'll be moving through it systematically by division. And so I would ask that you would be so kind, perhaps, and gracious to hold your questions until after we've kind of covered the material for each division. So that would be speaking to the core programs, the enhancements for that division, and the general highlights on outcomes and performance outcomes, if that's okay, because we've got a lot of enhancements to cover. We've got about 15, and so it's going to be very, very tight. So certainly appreciate that. That will help us better manage our time and make sure that we are moving the presentation in an orderly and succinct fashion for your benefit. So if I may, I'd like to take you to page 4 on the budget summary. As you can see, the Mayor's total 2016 recommended budget for CPED is $95,376,046. That includes $35,342,504 in general fund dollars and $60,033,542 in non-general fund dollars. The total 2016 enhancements for CPED are $6,801,000, which includes $3,326,000 in general fund dollars and $3,475,000 in non-general fund dollars. As you can see, also reflected on the chart as well, our current staffing level is at about 230. And as part of the mayor's recommended budget, we will be adding 9 additional positions. However, there will be some changes in that. And I will talk about those later as I cover different parts of the presentation moving forward. Development services. So very quickly, just a refresher, the core programs in development services consist of zoning and administration, construction code services, customer service center, and land use design and preservation. If I can turn your attention to page 8, enhancement number 1. The mayor's recommended budget includes an enhancement of $100,000 for the Development Review Customer Service Center. This enhancement would allow us to add 1 customer service rep to the counter. This additional position is an attempt to add the staffing needed to meet Met Council's mandated requirements for the administration of the SAC fees program. This will involve, on the part of the individual that will be doing the work, will be assessing water fees, essentially, and collecting those fees. This position will also help to maintain our customer service standards, which we know is certainly expected by our customers at large. I can ask you to turn to page 11. Enhancement number 2. The mayor's recommended budget includes an enhancement of $424,000 for construction code services. The $424,000 will support adding 4 new full-time inspectors to that division. Of course, the city is experiencing a high level of construction activity, and it is expected that the level of activity will be relatively constant over the next several years. This enhancement will help maintain the high level of inspection service that is expected by our customers, and most importantly, it will ensure the timely completion of construction projects. Let me also just add that these positions will help to ensure the high quality development and service that we would like to maintain here at the City of Minneapolis. And it would also ensure that the city standards in terms of safety, livability, health, and environmental sensitivity remain a top priority for us.
Mr. Taylor, you're
Yes,
finished
sir,
with
Mr.
this
Chair.
particular enhancement? Are you finished with this particular one? Or can I ask a question about this one, or do you have something else to add to it? I just wondered if you could describe a little bit more about the 4 positions. Are these folks who are going to be at the counter, or how are they going to be interacting with customers to help these developments stay on time?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, these are inspectors. They will
Inspectors.
be working for Construction Code Services. They will be out in the field. They will
Great.
be involved in the working alongside of the other inspectors in the built environment, typically doing what they're doing to ensure that safety and all the other requirements associated with the city standards are being met.
Yeah, I think that just reflects that we need more inspectors because of our growth that we're experiencing. So this is a good news thing. We're able to support these positions because of our growth in our city. So
That's
thank you for
exactly
that.
right. That's exactly right. I think it's also important to note, to your point, Mr. Chair, is that most recently Director Poore had shared information with us that the valuation of total permits issued this year have exceeded $1 billion for construction. Of course, last year they exceeded $2 billion, and the activity is still growing. And so it's expected that over the next several years that this activity in our built environment will remain relatively constant. And so the need to make sure that we have the right staff complement in place to do that work is critically important.
Great. Thank you.
Well, there are no enhancements for land use design and preservation, so I'm going to move forward very quickly, if you don't mind. And at this time, I'd like to ask Director Poore to come up and perhaps share some quick highlights on performance outcomes for development services. And at that time, we'll address any questions that you have regarding the information I just shared. Director Poore, please.
Morning, Chairman Quincy, committee members. As our director, Craig Taylor, indicated, we went over $1 billion in permit valuation before the end of the third quarter. My colleagues in planning tell me that we've got 33 major projects already approved by Planning Commission, which is about a 8.5% increase over year-over-year quarter from last year. Last year at this time, we had 28 major projects going through Planning Commission. Permit activity is up approximately 9% across the board in our Development Review Center. So even though the valuation of some of those permits is down, the activity is actually up. And it's an indication there may be more permit activity at a slightly lower value. Our customer service ratings over there still stay above 85%. They've been trending up for the last 3 years. Our poor and fair marks are flat at 1% to 2%, so there's always somebody who's unhappy when they get bad news. I just want to mention that on the SAC program, many of you are aware of the complaints that we get about the SAC program, and just as a reminder, we are a pass-through. It's a Met Council mandated program that we're expected to administer. And so one of the recent changes in the SAC program is that there was a deferral program that was initiated in working with Met Council. So people were getting with big sticker shock on SAC fees because of the change in water usage associated with the change in use, can try to enter into a deferral program. The city is expected to absorb that administration for that program. We also continue to work on assisting our small business people in appealing SAC assessments, which is a very time-intensive research service that we provide at no charge to these folks. And then the last thing is that we continue to do research on SAC fees to see how they might impact potential development. Think of a Surly development about SAC fees, about if there's credits or not credits. So the increased demands on the SAC services we're providing to people in a very robust economy, which is a good thing, along with just the increased permit activity, has really strained the permit staff. There's some other things going on with enterprise changes relating to the ELMS program. So we're kind of in an in-between period where we're not able to have the same efficiency on online permits. That just has to do with the natural transition associated with ELMS. So we've maintained our service levels more or less on getting permits done. The customer service levels remain high, but the volume is a strain on staff. I'm open to other questions if you have any right now about that. I'd just add for the construction code services inspectors, those are primarily going to be elevator and plumbing inspectors. The new construction, again, this high evaluated construction, primarily downtown, they all have elevators. Elevators are a very competitive market. It's hard to get elevator inspectors frankly, at the rate the city pays because there is such demand on their services, but we feel fortunate to have found some. And then, of course, these large buildings have very complicated plumbing systems as well. So the four positions really are aimed at elevator inspectors and plumbing inspectors to meet the demand of all this construction.
Great. Thank you very much. Not seeing any questions, so if we could continue, that'd be great. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, moving forward. Long Range Planning Division. Very quickly, to refresh, the core programs in long range planning consist of community planning, research, and public art. I might also add that this division also is seeking to build new capacity in the area of civic technology. So that's something that we will be perhaps moving forward on in the future, Council Member. The mayor's recommended budget includes an enhancement of $210,000 for long-range planning. The purpose of those funds will be used to hire 2 additional planners to deliver the comp plan process, or update, if you will. These individuals will certainly lead the process as well as coordinate and help drive the business activities across multiple working groups, which certainly include the steering committee, the technical advisory committee, and also core staff team. We will also work, or should I say they, and the staff in long-range planning will also work very closely with elected officials, the general public, the community experts, most importantly, to think about how we continue to move this process forward. These FTEs are critically needed to provide support in areas such as administration, research, coordination, and publication, as well as the facilitation of the community engagement process, which we envision is going to be quite involved and quite extensive. The comp plan, of course, as most of you know, is a foundational municipal policy requirement or framework. It is a statutory requirement. The plan needs to be updated every 10 years. Ours is due in 2018. And so we've got a couple of years to begin to mobilize the necessary resources. These 2 individuals are critically important. They will focus primarily on making sure that the work that needs to get done relative to the plan is being moved forward in a timely and consistent manner. With that, I'm going to ask Director Munson to come up and provide you with some performance highlights for that particular division.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, council members. So the performance outcomes are interesting in long-range planning, and I'll talk about them through the lens of really what I think are our 3 major contributors in terms of value proposition for the city. The first is that we are a finger on the pulse, and this is a substantial time commitment for planners on staff. As you can see on page 20 of your handout, staff from long-range planning are present in over 100 advisory committees, intergovernmental committees, and working groups throughout the region. We're there to be the ears that are listening and to be the steward of the vision of the city of Minneapolis in those processes, which include the Thrive process, light rail transit, the DNR process around the river. These are key goals for the city, and our staff is there. We also monitor 65 neighborhood organizations and are engaged in all plans at a neighborhood scale. We staff 10 boards and commissions. There's a huge list there of other things that we're engaged in with the community, and in that role, we really act as the bridge between citizens, other jurisdictions, the state, and the enterprise. And because of that highly time heavy commitment by staff, we have 6 planners on staff. The sector planners have this obligation to play that role of connecting the city to everything that's out there and being the steward of our goals. That commitment will maintain a lot of their work plan going forward. That's part of the reason why we really need to get committed new hours and full-time employees for the comp plan effort.
Ms. Munson, I might
yes.
suggest you advance the slide once.
Oh, sorry.
We can see this list of
Thank
exhaustive
you.
list of projects you're involved in. Thank you.
Thank you. So yes, exactly. So the second key piece of the value is, that again, I said we're the stewards, but we also codify the city's goals and strategic objectives. And that happens through, in the past year, 8 small area plans. Obviously, our facilitation of the process for the city to comment on and influence the regional policy plans that have been adopted, including Thrive, the housing policy plan, the water plan, the transportation plan, and so on, the parks plan. And of course, our ongoing facilitation in preparation for the comprehensive plan, which will be, again, the city's foundational policy document updated every 10 years by statute. We've created a couple of new tools as well. The public realm framework is in the works, and we were substantial participants in the creation of the Parklet program. Those are really important because they leverage private investment in some of the public goods that we all hold dear and that maybe resources are slim for. Parklet program alone leveraged almost $200,000 worth of private investment. And the third, I think, value proposition from long-range planning is that we really ensure that we have a data-driven and results-oriented city enterprise. And we have established a significant commitment on that front to procuring data and informing processes, both in terms of our customer service desk, but also in terms of policymaker objectives and simple aggregation of useful data. And I think the biggest example of that right now is the work we've done over the last year on housing and housing data to inform that future policy work. So although we don't have the sort of quantifiable outcomes that you might see from other divisions, like the number of permits issued or things that you can really count, the influence and the impact of the work of the staff is substantial and valuable, and we appreciate your consideration of our request. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, Director Munson. Any questions, please? Questions for Director Munson?
Nope, I'm not seeing any. I think we can go ahead. Continue. Thank you.
Moving forward, Economic Policy and Development Division. Just a refresher again, the core programs for economic and policy development are business development, employment and training, and business licensing. Enhancement number 4. The mayor's recommended budget includes an enhancement in the amount of $175,000, which would go into employment and training's budget. The purpose of the $175,000, ladies and gentlemen, will be used to support a citywide minimum wage study, which most of you are certainly already very familiar with. The study will look at how a minimum wage increase may impact the city of Minneapolis, Ramsey County, Hennepin County. The intention of the study will be obviously to evaluate the effects and the implications of a $12 and a $15 minimum wage increase phased in over a 5-year period. As most of you know, these funds will be used to hire a consultant to provide an independent but comprehensive analysis of the impact of this wage increase across a broad range of stakeholders, which includes industries, businesses, other institutions, and certainly our public citizens. I believe the RFP will be issued in October. Responses are due in December. The work is expected to begin by January and concluded by the end of March. Now, I might also note that $150K has been dedicated to paying for the study. Staff has held back an additional $25,000 in case there are additional needs that may evolve as a result of working through the process that we might need to invest in. It could be additional consulting services, a variety of other things. Enhancement number 5. The mayor's recommended budget includes an enhancement of $350,000 for CPED's employment and training program. These funds essentially would be used to support the Tech Hire program. I might add that this is a program that was established in response to a call to action by the White House. It is an accelerated training program. The approach is designed to give workers the basic skills they need to find higher wage paying jobs. Tech Hire will provide quality training in the IT field. The goal is to train 35 to 50 participants, and the target audience, of course, will be women and people of color. The training, again, will focus in the IT industry. A range of training from desktop to system developer will be provided. The entire $350,000 will be used to provide the 30 to 50 participants with scholarships and tuition. The training will occur at 3 accelerated learning programs currently participating in Tech Hire: IT Ready, Prime Digital, and Concordia University. We will also attempt to leverage an additional $250,000 in federal dollars to provide some wraparound services for the participants in the program. It's also important to note that, as I spoke earlier about the 9 FTEs that were reflected in the mayor's proposed budget, In discussions with staff, it has been determined that we won't need a full-time person to run tech hire because most of the personnel or staffing services would be provided by the organizations that we would be contracting with. In summary, ladies and gentlemen, there are two reasons why this program is critically important. The first reason is simply because the unemployment rate for African Americans and Latinos is 11.7 and 7.1% respectively in Minnesota, compared to 3.2% for whites. The second reason is that Minnesota has the highest financial gap between whites and minorities than any state in the nation. Ironically, minorities represent 40% of the population in Minneapolis, but they hold only 17% of the jobs. So this deserves attention, ladies and gentlemen. Last week, I was reading the paper, and I think most of you know that in the paper, it certainly articulated that the average income for African Americans has declined again. This, as far as I'm concerned, this is very serious. Our racial disparities are off the chart. We have the highest racial disparities in income, housing, and education than any major metropolitan city in the nation. And so I think we have to reflect on this is an opportunity to help move the dial. We're committed to equity, so this is an opportunity, an investment that we can make to help move the dial. If we don't, we're gradually going to become a city that is divided by poverty and privilege. Moving forward.
I'm sorry,
Number 6.
Mr. Taylor, one moment. Councilmember Goodman.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you. Mr. Taylor, how did CPED decide which programs were going to be the big beneficiaries of these large amounts of money and which were not? So, for example, Lewis King is doing a program to help African-American youth gain GEDs at Summit Academy OIC, and we didn't give him money, but we decided both in this Build Youth program someone decided that the High Tech Hire program and the Build Youth program were more valuable things to fund than what Lewis Smith is doing to help African American men get GEDs. So I'm just wondering, how did you decide? These are large amounts of money. So how did you decide who got it? Was there any kind of competitive process where we said, okay, here's what we want to do and this is who's going to provide the service? Or was this just like a grant making to nonprofits someone likes?
Well, to answer your question, Councilmember Goodman, and it's certainly Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, this what the information that's reflected here is part of the mayor's recommended budget.
But she came up with it and decided she was going to fund these organizations, or you guys made recommendations with regard to enhancements?
We made recommendations on the front end, but there were obviously a list of enhancement requests that we made, which extended beyond the ones that are reflected in the information that you have here. And the mayor's priority was to decide of those several enhancements that we had, or were requesting, the ones that she was willing to support and move forward.
So there was no process to determine that these two organizations were the ones we were going to fund, this Build Youth program, and which I think actually the high tech thing's really good. I think they're great people. I'm just wondering, did someone just say, we like them, they're cool, let's fund them? And who else got to be part of the process to determine if we were going to spend limited resources on their programs? I mean, I just came up with one. I'm very familiar with what Lewis King is doing with GED placement, which you'd think would be part of our youth violence prevention program.
Sure.
Before you get a high-tech job, you probably want to get a high school education.
Sure. No, that's a great, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, that's a great question. I think Director Frank might be able to respond to that a little bit better than I.
Thank you, Craig. Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman. As Craig indicated, we made some recommendations to the mayor's office for potential inclusion in mayor's proposed programs. With the council's approval, these two programs, we would put out competitive RFPs asking different respondents to help us provide these services. We would not be contracting with your approval, for instance, of one of these programs wouldn't say organization X would get all of this money. There would still be a process to do.
But isn't Tech Hire a very specific organization? I mean, I'm familiar with the people who came from the private sector who are doing this high-tech training program. I think
Correct.
it's really great. That's what it sounds like to me, is that we're giving them this money.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman. You're right, it reads that way. As a matter of practice, what we do is we put out a competitive call asking different organizations to tell us how they would most efficiently spend this money. So it would not be, it wouldn't be known ahead of time, all of this money is going to one organization.
How many organizations are doing Tech Hire programs?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman.
And what are they? What are their names?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Goodman, they're the ones that Craig just mentioned today, IT Ready, and thank you, Prime Digital Academy are the two that come to mind. There are others. Those are the existing ones.
Thank you. Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm curious on this build program. Who runs that? What's the story on that program? And I mean, why are we so specific about this? Is there a staff person attached to the Build Youth program?
Mr. Chair, Council President Johnson. So Build is, I can't remember if Craig covered this one, but just quickly. So this is a youth violence prevention program developed in Chicago that targets 9-year-old to 12-year-old youths. And Build leaders would be selected, again, as I was just explaining to Councilmember Goodman, would be selected through an RFP process. We would serve 4 cohorts, 13 youths per cohort, and we would serve youth in partnership with, for instance, Little Earth United Tribes and youth who reside in North Minneapolis or Cedar Riverside or South Minneapolis.
So who runs the program?
So with council's approval of mayor's proposed program here, city staff and employment and training would administer the money, but we would be spending it on is contracts with consultants with